Have you ever seen a dead man breathe? I did. It happened in the silence of a refrigerated morgue drawer, under flickering fluorescent lights, and it changed my life forever. That morning, I was just a nurse. By nightfall, I was at the center of a conspiracy I still don't fully understand. My name is Emilia Reyes. I'm 27, and for the past 3 years, I've worked as a post-mortem nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital, tucked near the harbor on the edge of the city. My job isn't glamorous. It's long hours, cold rooms, and silence interrupted only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional buzz of a body locker door. It's not the kind of job you brag about on dating profiles. That morning began like any other. The new intake list was pinned to the bulletin board. 8 names. All tagged, processed, waiting for autopsy or release. One caught my eye immediately: Willem Drack, M/58, cardiac arrest, to be released, August 17. Foreign name. High-profile flag on the corner of the sheet. Meaning, someone rich, someone important. Probably being shipped back to a grieving family with a press statement and a non-disclosure agreement. I got the call around 10:43 a.m. The widow had arrived. She wanted a final viewing before the body was released. This wasn't standard, but with VIPs, rules bend. I prepped the body, wiping his face gently with gauze soaked in rose water, the hospital's nod to dignity. His skin was pale, tinged bluish around the lips, but otherwise unremarkable. His hands were cold, the fingernails perfectly manicured. I wheeled him into the viewing room, where she was waiting. She wore black silk gloves, even indoors. Her face, partly veiled, was motionless as she lifted a sleek silver phone and began taking photos. I'd seen this before, wealthy grief wrapped in performance. Until her voice cut the silence. His hand just moved. I turned sharply. "No, ma'am. That's likely residual nerve twitching. Happens sometimes. He's breathing." I froze. Then I saw it, the faintest rise in his chest. I didn't speak. I just ran. Hit the emergency code button, yelled down the hall, called in Dr. Klein. Within 5 minutes, he was surrounded by a trauma team, monitors beeping furiously. Heart rate, weak. Oxygen saturation, climbing. Pupils reactive. The man wasn't dead. He was alive. Barely. But alive. The release papers had already been stamped. The death certificate signed. His body was scheduled to leave the hospital that afternoon. They wheeled him to intensive care. I just stood there, shaking, staring at the now empty slab. Later, I asked to see the autopsy notes. Dr. Klein looked confused. "There was no autopsy," he said. "He was marked as deceased before any cuts were made." That wasn't just odd. It was impossible. Something was wrong. And I had a sick feeling this was only the beginning. They told me to take the afternoon off. The trauma. The shock. "You did everything right," the attending nurse whispered, like it was some kind of comfort. But I couldn't stop seeing his chest rise. The cold man on the table, breathing under silk sheets. How many minutes had passed before I noticed? I couldn't go home. Instead, I wandered through the hospital's old west wing, the part where no one goes unless you're lost or hiding. And that's when I heard it. Her voice. The widow. She was on the phone, tucked in an alcove near the elevator, unaware I was around the corner. "No, he's not dead." "Yes, I know. They weren't supposed to check." It was enough. It should have worked. I stopped breathing. She turned suddenly, and for a second, I thought she'd seen me. But she walked the other way, her heels clicking softly like a countdown. I ducked into a supply closet, heart pounding. What should have worked? That evening, I returned to the morgue to gather my things. The lights were dim, the halls quiet. As I entered, I noticed someone standing near the locker wall. Young. Maybe mid-20s. Tousled dark hair, clean jeans, leather jacket too nice for a hospital at night. His back was to me. "Can I help you?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice. He didn't flinch. Just turned slowly and smiled, like we were old friends. "Just got lost," he said. "Looking for the psych unit. Took the wrong stairs." We weren't even near the psych unit. "Right," I said. "This floor's restricted after 6. You need a badge to even get through." "I'll be going, then," he interrupted, walking past me without another glance. "Nice night." I watched him disappear down the corridor, that strange smile still burned in my mind. Something was off. First the widow whispering about something working, then a stranger in the morgue acting like he belonged. I knew I should let it go. Call security, file a report, go home. But I didn't. The next morning, I woke to find a white envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a single photo. A picture of me standing in the morgue hallway the night before. On the back, scribbled in neat handwriting. "Be careful who you trust. Watch the widow." I dropped it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Whoever sent that photo had been there last night. Watching me. Maybe following me. But what scared me more? They were right. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, clutching the photo until dawn. Every creak of the apartment made me flinch. I lived alone. No roommates. No pets. Just a pair of deadbolt locks and a cheap chain I never trusted. By morning, I knew I had two choices: ignore the warning, or chase it. I chose the latter. First, I pulled up everything I could find on Willem Drack, the deceased. He was South African born but held dual citizenship. CEO of a major biotech firm. Net worth rumored to be north of $200 million. A quiet man in public, rarely gave interviews. No kids. Just the wife, Claudia Drack. I typed her name. First search result, a 2019 charity gala. She stood beside him in a red gown, hand on his chest, a smile too perfect to be honest. Second result, a pharmaceutical conference photo, taken in Berlin. She wasn't smiling. But a man stood beside her, tall, tan, with a gold watch and cold eyes. Labeled only as Dr. Felix Mercer, R&D head, Drack Corp. The third photo? It was Willem alone. But his hands looked frail, shaking even. I zoomed in. Parkinson's? No public mention of illness. But something was wrong. And if he'd been medicated, it might explain the near-death state. But that still didn't explain the forged autopsy. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. I froze. 3 sharp taps. Then a pause. I tiptoed toward the peephole, heart hammering in my ears. It was him. The guy from the morgue. Same jacket. Same calm eyes. I hesitated, then cracked the door. "You have 5 seconds to explain who you are." He smiled slightly. "My name's Lucas. I'm a private investigator. Willem Drack hired me 6 months ago." I opened the door just enough to glare. "And you were stalking me because..." "Because he suspected someone was trying to kill him," Lucas said plainly. "And he thought the threat would come through the hospital. I let him in." He paced as he spoke, like the truth made him restless. "Willem was paranoid," Lucas explained. "He believed someone close to him, Claudia or one of his executives, was messing with his meds. He didn't have proof. Just symptoms. He'd black out. His heartbeat would slow to almost nothing. Then snap back. I thought of the moment in the morgue. His cold fingers twitching. Breath catching under the sheet. Lucas sat down across from me, his eyes suddenly serious. But here's where it gets strange. Willem made me run a search on hospital staff. Not just general staff, morgue staff. That's how I found you. Me? I asked. He pulled out a file and dropped it on my table. Inside were documents I'd never seen. Old adoption papers. Hospital forms. A birth certificate. My name scribbled at the top in black ink. And then, I saw it. Father, Willem Drack. I stopped breathing. Lucas said gently, I didn't know how to tell you until I was sure. But yes, Emilia, you're his daughter. I didn't speak for a full minute. The room felt smaller. My breathing louder. Lucas just watched me, giving me space like he'd seen this reaction before. Like he expected the news would punch the air out of my lungs. You're wrong, I finally whispered. This has to be a mistake. I don't even look like him. Lucas pointed to the adoption file. Your mother died when you were a year old. Car crash in Johannesburg. Willem sent you to the US after that. Said it wasn't safe. I found court documents, sealed, but authenticated. You were adopted by a hospital staffer here. They moved you across state lines and kept you off the radar. Why? I asked. Why would he do that? Why abandon me? Lucas exhaled, eyes heavy with something close to pity. Because he was grieving. And scared. And rich enough to think distance equals protection. But that doesn't make it right. I stared down at the documents. My whole life had been quiet. Bland, even. I thought I was just some nurse with a cold job and a colder past. And now? Now I was the miracle daughter of a man who nearly died on my table. And someone had tried to make sure he stayed dead. I need to see him, I said. He's in ICU. If what you're saying is true, he needs to know I'm alive. Lucas shook his head. It's not that simple. He's under guard now. They're saying it was a medical error, but trust me, that widow of his? She's already working on spinning it. The media hasn't caught wind yet, but the hospital board is panicking. Someone wanted him dead, and they almost pulled it off. I didn't care. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed my keys. Then come with me. I don't care who tries to stop us. We got into the hospital through the service entrance. Lucas knew which security guards could be bribed with energy drinks and gossip. When we reached the ICU, it was quiet. No press. Just a single nurse on duty and a heavy-looking orderly posted at the door. Lucas showed him a badge I didn't recognize. Security audit, he said coolly. We need 5 minutes. The man grunted, stepping aside. And just like that, I was face to face with the man who, apparently, gave me life. Willem Drack looked fragile in the bed. Thinner than in the photos. Tubes in his nose, heart monitor blinking steadily. But his eyes opened the second I entered. And they locked on mine like he knew. He tried to speak, but the oxygen mask muffled it. I took a step closer. I'm Emilia, I said quietly. They say you're my father. A flicker of recognition. A tear, maybe. He lifted his hand with great effort, pointing toward the window. Lucas stepped aside, revealing a small whiteboard on the wall. I handed Willem the pen. It shook in his grip, but he managed 2 words before the pen dropped. She knew. I looked at Lucas. She? I asked. He nodded grimly. Claudia. Willem's wife. My stepmother? He scribbled again, this time slower. 3 more words. Switched the meds. I felt my knees give. Lucas grabbed my arm before I could fall. Willem tried to keep writing, but the effort was too much. The machines beeped faster. The nurse rushed in. Lucas pulled me back. "We've got what we need," he whispered. "Let's go." As we left the ICU, I turned once more to see Willem's face. Pale. Peaceful. Alive. He had secrets still buried, but he had written enough to get us started. And one thing was already clear. Claudia Drac tried to kill him. And I was next. After we left the ICU, Lucas didn't say anything for a while. He drove us in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping out a text. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "My office," he muttered. "We need to move fast. If Claudia knows Willem's alive, and I'm betting she does, she's going to try to clean up her tracks. Or run." We pulled up to a small building with frosted glass windows. It didn't look like a detective's office. More like a yoga studio. But inside was all wire boards, folders, and surveillance screens. Lucas had been watching more than just me. He dropped a folder onto the table. "This," he said, "is Claudia's life." There were financial records. Offshore accounts. Huge transfers made to a shell company based in Zurich. And then, flight reservations. One way. Departing the next evening. She was planning to disappear, Lucas said. And now she has even more reason to run. I sat slowly, staring at the evidence. One document stood out, a pharmaceutical log from Willem's personal supply cabinet. Half the vials were labeled in Dutch. The names didn't mean much, until Lucas translated. "This one," he said, pointing to a yellow label, "is a sedative. Safe in small doses. But if you swap it into a blood pressure regime, it drops heart rate. Makes you cold. Slows everything. Long enough to be pronounced dead." He looked at me. "It wouldn't show up unless someone ordered toxicology. And since she forged the autopsy papers, it nearly worked." My stomach turned. "I need to go back to the hospital," I said. "If she's still there." Lucas stopped me. "Wait." From the desk drawer, he pulled out a USB stick. "I hacked her security footage from Willem's estate. This might be what we need." He plugged it in. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Willem at home, frail, drinking a smoothie Claudia handed him. A timestamp. 1 hour later, paramedics arriving. Then another clip, Claudia on the phone, pacing. She was saying something. Lucas enhanced the audio. Her voice came through, low and rushed. "No, it won't be messy. He'll just go to sleep. By morning it'll be over." We looked at each other. That was all we needed. The next call was to a contact Lucas had in law enforcement, a detective named Marissa Ng. She listened, fast and tense, then told us to meet her at the hospital. Claudia was still there. She was pretending to grieve, in a black dress and pearls, answering questions from hospital staff with a tissue in her hand and not a single tear on her face. Until Detective Ng stepped into the room. "Claudia Drac," she said firmly. "You're under arrest for attempted murder and medical fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Claudia's face didn't move at first. Then she turned, to me. "You should have stayed in the dark," she hissed. "I lived in the dark my whole life," I said. "Now I want the truth." As they cuffed her and walked her down the corridor, Willem's nurse passed us. "He's stable," she said. "Still weak, but he's asking for you." My knees buckled with relief. Outside the hospital, the sun was rising. The city was just waking up. For the first time in days, I breathed in without shaking. Lucas looked over. "It's not over, you know." I nodded. No. But we're not alone now. And I wasn't. Not anymore. They moved Willem to a private recovery suite the next day. No more machines, just soft lighting, private security, and a silence I hadn't yet grown used to. The kind that wasn't cold, like the morgue, but warm, like a room waiting for someone to speak. When I walked in, he turned his head. His face was less pale now, color slowly returning. The tubes were gone. Just a nasal cannula and tired eyes. "Emilia," he rasped. "You came back." I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, I might cry. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thin but steady. "I should have told you sooner. About everything." I sat by the bed, unsure where to start. "How do you talk to a man who's both a stranger and your father?" "I always thought I was alone," I finally whispered. "That I came from nothing. That my life started in some social worker's file." Willem closed his eyes. "That was never the plan. After your mother died, I was lost. Claudia convinced me it would be safer. Said she'd help me start over. I thought I was doing the right thing by letting go." "Letting go of me?" I asked. "Of your daughter?" His eyes opened slowly. "I thought it would keep you safe. I didn't realize until too late that safety without love is just another kind of exile." I didn't speak. I just reached out, slowly, and took his hand. It was warm now. Alive. Later that day, Lucas met me outside the hospital cafe. He looked less exhausted, like the adrenaline had finally worn off. He slid into the seat across from me with a cup of something that smelled like bitter espresso and sleepless nights. "She's being transferred to federal custody," he said, no preamble. "They're adding financial crimes to the charges. Offshore fraud, wire transfer manipulation, identity falsification. It's going to get ugly." "Good," I said. "Let it." He gave me a small smile. "I thought you might say that." I looked out the window. "You know, a week ago, I was just embalming strangers. Now I'm a millionaire's secret daughter with a detective as my..." I stopped. He raised a brow. "As your..." I blushed. "Friend. I guess." Lucas leaned forward, voice low. "We can upgrade that later." I looked down, but I was smiling. The next week passed in flashes. Willem's health stabilized. Claudia's story hit the news, though the press was careful, calling it a misunderstanding of medication and alleged intent to harm. But people knew. Whispers followed the headlines. Lucas and I spent more time together. He helped me navigate lawyers, paperwork, hospital politics. We ate bad cafeteria food and fell asleep once in the waiting room with coffee cups in hand. And then one morning, Willem said something I didn't expect. "I want you to come work for me." I blinked. "What?" "I still own the clinic downtown. I was going to sell it, but maybe it's time to rebuild. From the inside. Someone honest. Someone I can trust." "I'm not a doctor," I said. "You're more than a nurse," he replied. "You're my daughter." The words felt unreal, but I didn't flinch this time. Maybe for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to. The clinic was a tall glass building tucked between two towers of beige offices. Nothing flashy. Just clean, quiet, and still standing after years of being ignored. Willem had built it in the 90s, part passion project, part proof that wealth didn't mean detachment. "This is where I worked before Claudia started making me scale back," Willem told me as we toured the halls. He leaned on a cane now, but his presence was stronger with every step. "She said it wasn't good optics for a CEO to be doing hands-on work." Lucas walked behind us, silent as always but close. I liked that about him. He wasn't always trying to fix things. Sometimes he just stood there and made me feel safer. Inside the office space, the dust hadn't settled yet. Paperwork stacked in corners. Equipment untouched. And on the desk, a photo of me as a toddler. Unlabeled. Framed. "You kept this?" I asked, voice tight. He nodded. "Everywhere I worked. Even when I couldn't say who you were." It was the first time I believed he had really loved me all along. He just didn't know how to show it. I started working there 2 weeks later. Not embalming. Not prepping the dead. This time I was managing logistics, patient files, clinical support coordination, real, live people. Breathing, smiling, talking people. And the first time a patient thanked me directly for helping their mother get proper care, I had to step into the hallway and cry. Because no one had ever thanked me for being alive. Lucas came by often. Sometimes under the pretense of checking in on the clinic security setup, other times just to bring me lukewarm coffee and insult my taste in granola bars. "You know," he said one day while perched on my desk, "you're actually terrifying when you're bossing around med techs." "I learned it from watching you boss around suspects," I replied, raising a brow. "Oh, is that what this is?" He grinned. "Flirting through insults?" I laughed, and didn't deny it. But not everything was sunshine and recovery. One night, while I was locking up the clinic, I saw a car idling across the street. No headlights. Tinted windows. The same car I'd seen near my apartment 2 days earlier. When I told Lucas, his smile vanished. "You sure?" "Yes." He ran a check on the license plate. It was registered to a private holding company. Offshore. Connected to someone who used to work under Dr. Felix Mercer, Claudia's associate. "She's still pulling strings," Lucas muttered. "From inside jail, or someone's doing it for her." I felt the ice creep back in. "So I'm still not safe." "No," he said. "But you're not alone anymore." And somehow, that made it okay. Lucas insisted we install security at the clinic. New cameras. Motion lights. A panic button under my desk. It felt excessive, until the third time that black car showed up, parked outside for exactly 13 minutes before vanishing again. "I don't think they're trying to scare you," Lucas said one evening, pacing in my living room. "I think they're waiting for something. Or someone." I didn't ask who. I already knew. Claudia. Even behind bars, her reach hadn't vanished. We discovered she'd hired a private proxy to delay court hearings. Bought silence from the company's former pharmacist. And someone, probably Mercer, was still in the wind. I was so sick of being stalked by ghosts. That week, Willem called me into his office. He looked stronger, his suits fit again, and his voice no longer sounded like it might shatter in the middle of a sentence. "There's something you need to hear," he said, handing me a flash drive. "This came from my lawyer. It's part of my revised will. Claudia doesn't know about it." I plugged it in. On screen, Willem appeared, recorded months ago. Thinner. Paler. But clear-eyed. "If you're watching this," he said, "then I've either died, or someone tried to make sure I did." I sat frozen. "Emilia, if they've found you, I want you to know the truth. Claudia married me for money. Mercer worked for her, not me. And they both knew about you. They knew you were alive." Lucas stood behind me, fists clenched. "She told me you died. That the adoption agency lost you. That it wasn't worth looking. But I never stopped looking. I left this clinic behind because Claudia said it made me weak. But this clinic is yours now. I want it to be the first thing they don't take." The video ended. I sat in silence. For once, it wasn't the morgue that left me cold. It was the realization that someone had spent decades trying to erase me, and failed. 2 nights later, the black car didn't just watch. It waited. Lucas had dropped me off and gone to get takeout. When I walked up the stairs to my apartment, I felt the air shift. That strange stillness, like someone had just left or was just about to arrive. The front door was slightly ajar. I froze. My chest pounded. I stepped back, reaching for my phone, but before I could dial Lucas, a voice spoke from inside the darkened hallway. "You shouldn't have come back to him." I turned, and there he was. Felix Mercer. Taller than I remembered from the photos. Colder too. Holding something silver in his hand. A syringe. "Stay back," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. Mercer tilted his head. "It was supposed to be clean. Painless. You were never supposed to matter." He stepped into the hallway light, revealing the full syringe. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, clear, odorless, deadly. "Claudia gave up everything for him," he hissed. "Do you think she was just going to let you take it back?" I edged toward the kitchen, fingers searching the countertop behind me. Keys. A phone. Anything. "You tried to murder him." "No. We freed him. From his guilt. From you." The words stung more than I expected. Because deep down, I still wanted to believe that someone, anyone, had protected me all those years, not erased me. Before he could move, the door behind him burst open. Lucas. Fast. Focused. His fist slammed into Mercer's jaw before the man could raise the syringe. It clattered to the floor. They fought hard, ugly. Not choreographed, just real. Desperate. Mercer got in a jab that knocked Lucas against the hallway wall. Blood at his lip. But Lucas came back swinging. I grabbed the dropped syringe and ran to the bathroom, dumping the contents into the toilet and flushing fast. By the time I returned, Mercer was pinned, panting, groaning beneath Lucas' knee. Sirens wailed in the distance. Lucas looked at me, his voice hoarse. "You okay?" I nodded slowly, heart still hammering. "You saved my life." "You saved your own," he said. "I just showed up late." That night, we gave our statements to the police. Mercer was taken away in cuffs, bruised, bleeding, silent. Claudia, already in custody, was immediately hit with conspiracy and attempted murder charges. This time, there would be no slick PR fix. No whispered bribes. No second chances. Willem sat beside me in the hospital lobby as the police car pulled away. His hand on mine. Not as a stranger anymore, but as a father. "I almost lost you," he said quietly. "You did," I replied. "But you found me again." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I don't deserve that chance." "Maybe not," I said. "But we get to decide what comes next." The next morning, I opened the clinic. No threats. No shadows. Just the hum of fluorescent lights, warm sunlight through glass, and people walking in not to die, but to heal. Lucas showed up around noon with lunch and a sheepish smile. "I figured you earned something better than granola bars." "Careful," I teased. "You're starting to sound like someone who wants to stick around." He shrugged. "Only if you want me to." I leaned in. "I do." 3 months later, I stood in the very same viewing room where I'd once watched a dead man breathe, and where my entire life changed. Only now, I wasn't there for death. I was marrying Lucas. It was a small ceremony. No photographers. No expensive flowers. Just close friends, Willem in the front row, and a clinic staff member who also happened to be ordained officiating between patient files. I wore a white dress with sleeves too long and a veil I'd borrowed from a nurse who never got to use hers. Lucas wore the same leather jacket he had on the night we met, paired with a tie he clearly didn't know how to tie. Willem cried the whole time. After the vows, we returned to the clinic, our clinic. It had been renamed the Reyes Drac Wellness Center. We'd added a mental health wing, a low-cost family medicine unit, and a program for training at-risk youth in medical administration. Every plaque on the wall bore both our names. Because I wasn't a secret anymore. I was someone's daughter. Someone's wife. Someone who mattered. The media buzz faded. Claudia was sentenced to 18 years. Mercer flipped on her during the trial. His confession helped close a dozen other corporate malpractice cases. The empire she tried to build out of poison and lies crumbled. But I didn't follow the headlines anymore. I had patience. I had purpose. I had peace. Some evenings, when the clinic emptied and the lights went low, I'd walk the halls alone. Not in fear. But in awe. Because I'd once worked in a morgue surrounded by silence and cold. And now, I worked in a place that saved lives, not buried them. Willem came by every Sunday. We shared coffee. He'd tell me stories about my mother, the way she laughed, the way she danced, how she once painted sunflowers on his office walls just to make the numbers feel softer. He gave me photos. Letters. A life I never knew was mine. One day, while we stood on the rooftop of the clinic, watching the sunset, Willem turned to me. "You saved me," he said simply. "No," I replied. "You just came back to life." He smiled, weak but genuine. Maybe we both did. Epilogue. I still carry the photo. The one someone slipped under my door, back when I didn't know who I was or why anyone would care enough to warn me. It reminds me that even in darkness, someone saw me. And now, I see myself too. Not as the morgue nurse. But as Emilia Reyes Drac. Daughter. Survivor. Healer. And finally, whole. Yellow heart.